A doctor who provided medical services to a child after she was violently abused is facing criminal indictment after it turns out she may have obfuscated severe abuse. And under Indiana law, she may be criminally liable. The story you may have heard. I'm trying to be delicate in my language for the sake of families, individuals who may be listening to my podcast with younger people around, but it's a truly brutal story. So just so you've been warned, a young girl, as the viral story claimed, was impregnated, a 10-year-old girl, as it were. She sought medical emergency treatments in Indiana because in Ohio, they passed a heartbeat bill, which typically bans abortion after 6 weeks. In Indiana, the girl received treatment and the story went viral. Evidence was scant. There were no criminal charges. Almost no information had been filed about what really happened. Many people questioned this. Then it turned out the story was true, but the story is absolutely creepy. While the little girl does exist, the story itself appears to be orchestrated for political gain. Now, I refrain from reporting on the viral claims of the left because, well, I need evidence before I can say something is true or isn't, and there's not much I can say about something that's an unfounded internet rumor. But when it turned out there was, in fact, a little girl who received this emergency medical service, and that's what it was, well, then many on the left said we were right, the right was wrong, and they tried to hide the fact that women need these treatments, these services, or little girls in this instance. But here's where it gets damning. Under Ohio law, the little girl would not have been denied emergency medical services. And this is outlined in a statement from the Ohio Attorney General released not that long ago, breaking down what the law actually says. So why is it that this little girl did not receive the emergency medical treatment she required in Ohio? Why did they not try to get the treatment, the procedure done in Ohio? Well, I don't know. But I do believe, one, if they did in Ohio and were denied, it would have been politically more advantageous for them. But I think when you look at the law as it stands, they decided to go to Indiana without filing a report because they wanted the political play. I believe they sat on information about the criminal in question so that the right would be drawn into a trap, calling it out as a potential hoax, and then being smeared when they say, see, look, the little girl actually exists. But questions are arising now with the Republican Attorney General in Indiana saying, why was this not properly reported? The Washington Post says it was, in fact, properly reported. Fox News reports, in fact, the perpetrator, who is 27 years old, is being listed as 17 by the doctor in Indiana. Now, they may argue she may have made a mistake and just assumed that was true. But it doesn't really matter, does it? The question the AG has is, how did this person not come to justice? Why was there not more information given? Why was the information incorrect? And we need an investigation, meaning this abortionist could be criminally charged. Now, I want to point out something funny and strange. Abortionist is an old term. I looked it up. It goes back to 1844. I mean, abortion's been around for a while. And a person who provides an abortion is an abortionist. Yet it's considered today to be improper to say, that is derogatory. I believe it was the AP, one of these outlets said, don't use the term. It is offensive. I don't care what you think is offensive or not. It's a term that describes a person who does a thing. And this abortionist out of Indiana may be criminally charged. But let's start with the first story. And that is what's happening with the AG. Before we do get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member to support our work. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast Uncensored After Show Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. We had a really great week. Monday, probably the funniest show. So if you go to timcast.com and click members only, it will bring you to the full roster of all of our after hours uncensored show. Dave Landau, the comedian, was on Monday with Jamie Kilstein, and it was hilarious. You definitely want to check that out. And you're supporting our expansion in creating culture, trying new things, hiring our journalists, calling out the lies from the mainstream media, supporting videos like this. So if you want to help us out, timcast.com. But don't forget, you can also just smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Now, let's get into that first story. Politico reports Republican AG says he'll investigate Indiana doctor who provided care to the victim in question. The account about the girl has sparked intense dialogue in Washington, with some questioning its validity. Politico says Indiana's Republican Attorney General said on Wednesday that his office planned to investigate the Indiana doctor who helped a victim who crossed state lines to have an abortion. Dr. Caitlin Bernard, an obstetrician gynecologist in Indianapolis, has told multiple outlets that she provided care to the 10-year-old after a child abuse doctor in Ohio contacted her. The child was 6 weeks and 3 days into the pregnancy, Bernard said. After the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last month, a wave of state-level abortion restrictions took effect, including in Ohio, a state that bans abortion after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, with no exceptions for rape or incest. Abortion in Indiana is banned after 22 weeks of pregnancy, with some exceptions for medical emergencies. Pause. Politico, why did you not include there is a medical exception to the rule? Why did you not include that this girl would fall under that medical exception? No questions. It's because it's political. Quote, we're gathering the evidence as we speak, and we're going to fight this to the end, including looking at her licensure if she failed to report. And in Indiana, it's a crime to intentionally not report. This is a child, and there's a strong public interest in understanding if someone under the age of 16 or under the age of 18, or really any woman, is having abortion in our state. And then if a child is being abused, of course, parents need to know, authorities need to know, public policy experts need to know. There are strict reporting requirements in both Ohio and Indiana for abortions and rape allegations. Rokita doubled down on his threats of criminal charges in a letter dated Wednesday, but released publicly on Thursday. The letter to Governor Eric Holcomb, a Republican, called for records from the Indiana Department of Public Health and Department of Child Services to determine whether Bernard filed a report within the required 3-day window. Here's what we know so far. The Washington Post says she did report. Fox News says she reported the individual, the perpetrator, as a minor, which is very strange, which would change the nature of the crime committed. An illegal immigrant, 27 years old, committed the crime. Why was it wrong? I think this plays into the hoax narrative. They could have just gotten the treatment done in Ohio, but they didn't. They weren't denied, it seems. They were just referred out. There could have been an exemption made, and it would have been good for Republicans, which is why I think they refused to do it. If in Ohio, the doctor went to the government and said, look, here's what's happening, or if the doctor just went along with this, the Republicans would absolutely say, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. We accept these exceptions and we want to protect little girls who have been abused. That would not have worked for the Democrats. It would have favored the Republican narrative that they do allow emergency treatments in extreme cases and in cases of child abuse. But they decided just to leave the state, make a big story about it, and not explain what was going on. This is why I say it's a hoax. The doctor just made the mistake of incorrectly reporting the age of the man in question. Something doesn't add up. Now, you can argue it's all gross incompetence across the board, but why not just get the procedure done in Ohio? Why not make it a big political argument if they were denied, which they weren't? Because politics. If at least in my opinion, I could be wrong. I don't know. That's what I see here. If Dr. Bernard has failed to file the required reports on time, she has committed an offense, the consequences of which could include criminal prosecution and licensing repercussions. Ohio's Republican Attorney General Dave Yost said on Fox News on Monday there was no evidence of a report being filed for the 10-year-old's case, though based on the felony complaint, a police report was generated in late June for the abuse of the child. The account about the young girl has garnered national attention amid the fall of the constitutional right to abortion in the U.S. and has become a key focus of the abortion debate. The account sparked intense dialogue in Washington, with some questioning the story's validity, particularly after President Joe Biden cited the episode last week while slamming the court's decision in a major speech on abortion policy. She was forced to have to travel out of state to Indiana to seek to terminate the pregnancy and maybe save her life. Biden said in remarks, 10 years old, 6 weeks pregnant, already traumatized, was forced to travel to another state. Convenient, isn't it? It's convenient Joe Biden gets to say that, because they did not get the treatment done in Ohio. Now, I know the argument could be that the doctor in Ohio says, I won't do it because of the law. Why didn't the doctor even try to just say, we have to do this? Why didn't they try fighting the law in Ohio? It doesn't add up. Laziness? Ignorance, maybe? In my opinion, based on the misreporting of the criminal involved, I think this was a hoax. Now, Dr. Caitlin Bernard might sue Indiana AG Todd Rokita for defamation. That's absurd. I really don't think that will go anywhere. Now, I don't know what Dr. Caitlin Bernard's intentions were, and it's possible that when the case was referred to this doctor, she didn't know who the perpetrator was, and she was given the age of 17. Here's the story from Fox News. Ohio 10-year-old's alleged perpetrator was listed as a minor in abortionist's report to state. No, hold on. Was this the Ohio doctor or the Indiana doctor? The Indiana doctor. Dr. Caitlin Bernard reported that the alleged perpetrator was approximately 17 years old in an official filing to the Indiana Department of Health obtained Thursday by Fox News Digital. On Wednesday, Ohio authorities charged 27-year-old Gerson Fuentes, an illegal immigrant, with the crime in question on a minor under 13 years old. I'm trying to be delicate with the language, so yeah. Fuentes confessed to the crime to Columbus Police Department investigators. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost said in a statement Wednesday. However, the 10-year-old's mother said her daughter was fine, and everything they say about Gerson is a lie. When confronted Thursday by a Telemundo reporter. The alleged crime made headlines earlier this month after Bernard told the Indy Star on July 1st she had performed the abortion on a young victim, who she said was forced to cross state lines from Ohio. So this we know. It's possible Caitlin Bernard was just given bunk information by the family. And it seems like the family is trying to defend this criminal. So I don't know. How does this happen is the question. And I really just do not believe them. I do not believe them. Of course, the Republicans don't want to be in this position right now. Of course they don't. Why are they? Because for some reason, a medical exception was not sought after. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost says, the Ohio Attorney General's office issued the following legal explainer regarding their exceptions on the heartbeat law. They say, Ohio's heartbeat law appears in section 2919.19 through 2919.1910 of Ohio Revised Code. The relevant part of Ohio's heartbeat law appears in the section, blah, 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 blah. There is no gestational time limit in Ohio's heartbeat law. But hold on. They said it bans it after 6 weeks. The AG says that's not true. The statute contains 3 exceptions, though they are not labeled as such. 1, to prevent the death of the mother. The second, due to a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function. And third, the case of ectopic pregnancy. So there's no time limit. This is why I'm saying it's a hoax. You mean to tell me that they said the girl was six weeks and 3 days? Oh, it was too late. But the law literally does not have a time limit. It also says there's a medical emergency. They said, a condition that in the physician's good faith medical judgment, based upon the facts known to the physician at the time, so complicates the woman's pregnancy as to necessitate the immediate performance or inducement of an abortion in order to prevent death of the pregnant woman or to avoid a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of major bodily function of the pregnant woman that delay in the performance or inducement of the abortion would create. That's what kind of tongue-tied me. I apologize for pulling the Biden. Let me read that again. Okay. To avoid a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman that delay in the performance or inducement of the abortion would create. Okay. The italicized language is crucial as another provision. The serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function. To mean, all right, that legalese is getting me all jumbled up. You get the point. The main takeaway here is there was no time limit. She was able to get the procedure. A hoax. A hoax, right? That's what it seems like. We have this from the Washington Post. Records show Indiana doctor fulfilled duty to report 10-year-old's abortion. Really? But do they not mention that she reported it wrong? That's what I find crazy about this. They don't. They just say she did the right thing. On Wednesday, however, the Columbus Dispatch confirmed the account, reporting the 27-year-old man, Gerson Fuentes. Do they mention that in Indiana she reported it incorrectly? Reporting it incorrectly may not be a crime. So we will see how that plays out. But I'm sorry, man. The whole thing seems so perfectly orchestrated. I'll tell you how. The left consistently puts out stories like Jussie Smollett with limited evidence, and they fall for it. Later on, the right calls them out, and it turns out the right was correct. Kyle Rittenhouse, Covington Catholic, and Jussie Smollett are just some recent examples. Then we get this viral story with no reporting, with no confirmation, just a rumor. No one can seem to find any information about it, but because the story gets so big, the right takes the bait. Why? Conservatives started talking about a story that didn't exist? That's the stupidest thing ever. No, seriously. They react. That's what the right does. It's sad. Don't. Lead the charge. I did not engage with the story because there was no story to engage with. A bunch of random Twitter accounts were talking about a thing that they had no evidence of. Sorry, not interested. Next question. Then it turns out the girl existed. And as soon as that happens, they all point, see, the right was wrong. The right was wrong. See, we proved it. Whatever. They fell for this one. Now, I think it was strategic. That's my opinion. Because it's just such a weird story, the way everything falls into place. The reality is the conservatives were wrong on this. The girl does exist, but I question the actions of the individuals involved. Now, where are we going with all of this? These are the propaganda stories used to try and codify Roe v. Wade, I guess. Where we currently are right now is that Democrats, they want power, extreme power. And AOC is calling for the stripping of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And it's insane. It's an insane power grab. Rep. AOC tweets, with our basic rights under threat from a rogue Supreme Court, Congress needs to exercise our legal authority to the fullest extent. That's why today we call on Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi to support stripping the Supreme Court's jurisdiction over abortion. Now, on the surface, it's laughable because the Supreme Court did just that. The Supreme Court literally said, we do not have authority in this matter. So AOC is like, they shouldn't have authority in this matter. Oh, okay. Well, if you look a little bit deeper, it's more than that. AOC is saying they shouldn't have appellate jurisdiction in this matter and should defer to a separate court. And that can be arranged. So it's not that she's saying the Supreme Court shouldn't be able to rule on Roe v. Wade as they already did, or that it should be kicked back to the states. She's disagreeing with their ruling and saying a different court should oversee these rulings. It would seem they're trying to reinstate Roe v. Wade in a surreptitious, sneaky way that violates major core tenets of this country. AOC says Congress is granted the authority to remove the Supreme Court's jurisdiction under Article 3. To protect marriage equality, contraception, and more, we need to limit the power of the far-right court that's already overturned Roe v. Wade. So what AOC is saying is that because the Supreme Court, notably Clarence Thomas, questioned Obergefell v. Hodges, I believe, let me make sure we get all these. Obergefell v. Hodges, Lawrence v. Texas, and Griswold v. Connecticut, we need right now to take away the appellate authority of the Supreme Court and give it to a local DC or to a federal DC court so that they can issue the final ruling. It's a power play. It's a major power play. The Supreme Court said one simple thing. We do not have the authority. AOC now wants to grant the authority to a lesser court. Let me stress that again. The Supreme Court says, leave us out of it. So AOC says, fine, give the final say to a lower court. That makes absolutely no sense. It's a power grab. It's an insane power play. And I'm not surprised the Democrats are trying to do it. Now, they think they're winning this fight in it to a certain degree. They think their propaganda will work. It will not. They've lost in the Supreme Court. They're trying everything they can. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. The Washington Post ran this op-ed, which is particularly fascinating. A Berkeley professor's Senate testimony didn't go how the left thinks it did. I love it. Everyone agrees it was an epic own. There's much less agreement about who got owned. In Tuesday's Senate hearing on the Supreme Court decision over overturning Roe v. Wade, Senator John Cornyn asked University of California at Berkeley law professor Kiara Bridges whether she thought a baby that is not yet born has value. this ensued. Quote, I believe a person with the capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence. They have agency. Because that's how they talk. They do this weird thing that's extremely, it's just weird. You look at Christine Blasey Ford. She does the look down, the weird thing with the eyes. Peter Strzok did the same thing, looking down and and there's another thing that we see from like AOC and this woman where they get asked a simple question. Does an unborn child have value? I believe a person with the capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence. They have agency. I think it's creepy. I think it's manipulative. And I think many people who are easily manipulated fall for it. No, I'm talking about the baby, Cornyn interrupted. And I'm talking about the person with the capacity for pregnancy. She retorted, I'm answering a more interesting question to me. Then when it was his turn to speak, Senator Josh Hawley returned to this exchange saying, you referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women? In even tones, Bridges replied that while many cisgender women have the capacity for pregnancy, many don't. While some trans men and non-binary people do. But after a little back and forth, she gave up. So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, she said with an exasperated laugh, and it opens up trans people to violence. The whole thing became a Rorschach test. Many progressives cheered to see Professor Bridges school a reactionary Republican. But conservatives also cheered because they see a gift to Republican election campaigns. Unlike a Rorschach test, however, this one has a right answer, and the progressives have it wrong. Moreover, the fact that they can't see just how badly this exchange went for their side shows what a big mistake it was to let academia and media institutions turn into left-wing monocultures. Within those rarefied circles, Bridges' answers were exquisitely and exactly correct. She allowed no hint that late-term fetuses might have more moral value, because that might suggest their interests could be weighed against those of the, pregnancy capable. Nor did she concede an inch to the idea that biology can trump gender identity. And when she ran out of patience with Hawley's questions, she pounced in exactly the prescribed manner. Your questions are transphobic, Senator, and you are putting trans people at risk of violence or suicide by denying their lived reality. Yet outside those circles, Bridges' answers don't really sound so convincing. In most of America, does a late-term fetus have value is a softball. And when Hawley leaped in to ask whether women are the ones who give birth, a question few Americans today would struggle with, she resorted to extended question begging that might be fine for a Berkeley classroom, but it just won't do for a political debate in which the majority of voters disagree with you. Anyone who has ever tried to convince anyone of anything should be able to see that Bridges' approach was counterproductive. Why then do so many articles and tweets cheer the way she shut down Hawley? Because there is one place that snickering, eye-rolling, and so forth are very effective. Within an insular group where they help delineate the lines of acceptable belief. A sufficiently incredulous, are you suggesting? Effectively signals a silent corollary. Because if you are, we'll shun you. It tells people that this topic is not up for discussion. Within progressive institutions, that's transphobic is another such signal, and it works. Within progressive institutions. In fact, it works too well. It leaves them unprepared to argue with outsiders. McArdle goes on to say, the writer for the Washington Post, when I was reporting on the story of transgender college swimmer Leah Thomas, I noticed a curious disconnect. If you read newspapers, watch television, or listen to academic experts, you might have thought that most people supported Thomas, with some dissent from a few reactionaries or jealous competitors. Yet the overwhelming majority of people I actually spoke to thought it was unfair for her to compete in women's events, even though most of them were liberals who would never dream of voting Republican. They were, however, a fearfully silent majority, which meant Thomas's supporters never had to come up with good arguments. Instead, many of my questions got essentially the same answer as the one Bridges ultimately gave to Hawley. Even asking the question is transphobic and dangerous. Within a narrow set of media and academic circles, this was devastatingly effective tactic that made it impossible for opponents to organize an effective response. Outside those circles, however, it failed utterly. The Swim Federation swiftly made new rules to bar Thomas, along with other athletes who transitioned after puberty, from participating in future races, which doesn't solve the problem. Full stop, full pause. Puberty is meaningless. Meaningless. You need only look at the 12-year-old boys who have performed historical feats in skateboarding, like landing the first 1080s, and the 12-year-old girls who struggle to get anywhere near that. Sad reality. for many of these progressives, the reality for everyone else. I wondered then whether that decision might have gone differently, or at least be less surprising, if Thomas's supporters had been forced to grapple more directly with the things her opponents were saying, quietly, in private, where they couldn't be overheard. And I wonder now, what further surprises are in store if progressives can't figure out how to talk to the majority of the country that disagrees with them on a whole lot of things. So here we are. The propaganda isn't working. The more these people sit in their little caves ignoring reality, the more they lose. Now, it may be effective in a certain sense. They may be able to keep the cult going with their lies. But every day we chisel away at that stone. We wake people up. We challenge the machine. We call out the lies. Jesse Waters says AOC is a big problem for Democrats. Reacts to AOC suggesting January 6th could be an inside job. Oh, I can rag on AOC for when I think she's wrong. She's right here. Here's what I don't get. Jack Posobiec. We like Jack. Jack's a good friend of the show. Jack's a good friend. And he said AOC admits. I dare say, Jack, she doesn't admit anything. She calls out exactly what we called out. When we come out and say someone opened the door for these people on January 6th, we're not admitting to it. Because what does that mean? Does that mean we know the person who did and we were hiding it before? No, AOC is calling out what we've been calling out too, unanswered questions. I think we have to be careful about that framing. When Jack tweeted AOC admits the doors were opened, it makes it seem like she knew before and was withholding that information when she very clearly and in exasperation was demanding that investigation. I agree with AOC. Jesse Waters says, AOC is suggesting that January 6th might have been an inside job. How come Twitter hasn't banned that? She's getting into some very dangerous territory here. AOC is right about that. Questioning the institutions in D.C. is dangerous. That's why we are not allowed to ask about January 6th. The FBI's role in the collusion hoax, the State Department covering up Benghazi, the Wuhan lab. Welcome to my world, AOC. Dip your toe in. The water's warm. Next thing you know, the congresswoman is going to start asking about the laptop from hell. So AOC is a live wire and a big problem for Democrats. She's calling the January 6th committee a sham, saying her side of the aisle is covering up the truth about what happened that day. That's a very dangerous place for AOC to be. And she is. She said, why aren't we investigating this? She's outright saying the Democrats are choosing politics over the truth. Bravo. AOC may have a preconceived notion about what's really happening. I don't care. I don't care what the right thinks. I don't care what the left thinks. I care that both sides agree somebody opened the doors. Somebody was helping these people on the inside. Let's get to the bottom of it. Instead, you get the right just going after AOC because Alex Stein yelled, "You had a big booty." We got Alex Stein joining us on Timcast IRL. I think he's a funny guy. I think he's done some good stuff calling out the machine and mocking them. And I think culture jamming is extremely important. On this one, I got no problem criticizing the dude. I think it's funny. People are like, oh, Tim's mad. It's like, yo, dude, you think I'm going to sit here and just blindly agree with everything the right ever does? Sorry, I don't play that. When Alex Stein goes to these board meetings and pretends to be woke and just calls it out, that is brilliant, effective culture jamming. I've talked about doing similar things. You want to shock the system by just showing them themselves, holding up a mirror. Culture jamming is brilliant. Yelling at AOC that she has a big booty on the steps of the Capitol makes no argument, exposes nothing, and empowers the left, the far left, and the Democrats, gives them fuel for their fire, and allows them to use that as a propaganda tool to smear conservatives. It was a mistake. It's funny. I wouldn't do it. I don't like it. But I think the whole circumstance is funny. AOC was talking about Brett Kavanaugh. Let him eat cake. She reacts to Kavanaugh being forced out of his restaurant, saying, poor guy. Well, look, I'll tell you this. You got to have sympathy for people who are getting heckled. However, there's a big difference here. Kavanaugh was being protested in private. AOC was being heckled on her way to work. They're different scenarios. You shouldn't yell about AOC's big booty because it solves nothing. It gives the left power. It gives them an argument. It gives them propaganda. And it doesn't prove a point for you. What am I supposed to say here? If Alex Stein says, AOC, why do you support killing babies? I'd be like, well, there you go. He's asking a question. Instead, he just called her sexy and laughed. So there's no argument to be made. So what is there to support? The people protesting Kavanaugh were making an argument. A bad one, I might add. But there's more merit in an argument against in politics. I don't think they should be protesting at a private restaurant over what, Kavanaugh eating or whatever. It is what it is. You can criticize it for a lot of things. If Alex Stein saw AOC and said, here's a contradiction, that would have been interesting, because then you know what would have happened? If he was actually protesting AOC and she got mad and called it out and screamed about it, then you'd come out and say the Kavanaugh thing. But in this instance, I get why AOC's mad. It's not the same thing. Yelling about her butt and how she looks is not a political argument. That's it. There's no argument. So AOC simply says, yeah, Kavanaugh was being protested on the merit. I was being yelled at over my butt. Like, yeah, okay, that's convincing. Now you can argue it's not. You can argue what you want to argue. You're allowed to. But I'll tell you this. We're in a fifth generational war, an information war, an info war, as it were. We got to win hearts and minds. Do you think yelling about AOC's booty convinces working class people who want the gas prices to go down to vote Republican or to listen to Republicans? No. It is crass and crude and drives people away. It actually makes AOC look sympathetic. And then when we should be talking about her calls on January 6th, we don't. About January 6th, all we hear about is these booty stories. So I think the important thing we do is make our arguments. The important thing we do is we call out the manipulations and the propaganda, and we try to get to the bottom of things. The Republican AG in Indiana is doing that. I think something fishes afoot. I could be wrong. That's fine. I'm giving you my opinion based on the facts. So we'll see. The next segment is coming up at youtube.com/TimcastIRL tonight at 8 p.m. We're going to be hanging out with Alex Stein. I look forward to it. I think overall he does a lot of good work with culture jamming and activism, and it's brilliant. I don't like what he did here with AOC. We'll have that conversation. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL.